Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our lovely guests, Jaycee and C.Note, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So Christian, would you like to take the lead?
Hi, yeah, of course I will. Hi, my name is Christian Rivera, aka C.Note. I am the host of Dopamine, which is a show, a project where basically I talk about mental health empowerment, but usually using Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, all sorts of different maps and models and systems to support people in their growth as a human being. So I have a podcast, I have a show, dopamine.life, to go check all those things out. And then we're here to talk about type stuff because I'm always on the internet talking about type at Let's Go C.Note and being an obnoxious INTP because that's what I do. That's sort of the basics. There's a lot more. I'm a digital producer and have been doing that for 20 years. That's really the only other thing you probably need to know right now.
That is so cool. How about you, Jaycee?
So hi, I'm Jaycee. I have a YouTube channel known as ENTP Time, and I have like a couple of different series going on. So ENTP Time and then Confessions of an Enneagram Type 3. So those are my types. I also have like a productivity series because I am a student in university right now. And as a 3 and as a perceiver, I want to like share a lot of tips on how to like get things done, even though we're known for like procrastination and not following through with stuff. So I like to try and help out people who are struggling with procrastination, like chronic procrastination. And I'm like, you could do it like from a fellow P, like you can do it, you don't have to be like the J to like figure it out. So yeah,
Right.
that's me.
Yes, and I highly recommend you guys check them both out. I'll have their links down below as well. And today we'll be talking about INTP versus ENTP. And these two types have the same cognitive functions, but in a slightly different order. So the ENTP leads with extroverted intuition and the INTP leads with introverted thinking. So Christian, have you noticed any differences between you and ENTPs?
Oh man, they're what's funny is because they're so similar in terms of how it looks in terms of the letters. I start from there, from super basic, like that place of like if you just simply the difference between I and E is like the first place to start. Like a lot of ENTPs are going to be much quicker, much more naturally in terms of speaking and thinking out loud and reacting, whereas I always need an extra second, unless it's something that I've done a ton of thinking around or I've had a lot of practice around, like type. I can answer things pretty quickly about this stuff. On my YouTube channel, a lot of people are like, "You're an ENTP," and I'm like, "No, bro, I've just had a lot of time to think."
Yeah.
So I can kind of show up and I can be playful around the ideas that I'm comfortable and familiar with. But in terms of just kind of being sort of improv-y in the world, it's not as easy to do in any context. And I think ENTPs are going to be better at adaptability in more contexts because of that natural desire to just explore and play and poke at things. If that makes sense, is like some first places to start with that.
Jace, you really like to poke at things. I feel like sometimes you're really good at getting, like, saying things that get a reaction out of people and kind of enjoying
Oh,
that.
yeah, I love that. It's like the playful like NE and like FE wanting to get the reaction that you expect, but also like since I have polar FI, I'm like, will it really bother them? I'm like, well, let's like poke at it first and see if it really bothers them instead of like thinking beforehand, like this might make them uncomfortable. I'm like, let's see if they get uncomfortable, Yeah,
Right.
so yeah, I agree with that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll do that sort of thing too, but I'll do it more so with a specific purpose. Like I'll do it for, a topic that and you can think of it as a control thing because a lot of the TI is a little bit about, this sort of personal sense of control and discipline. And if I know a topic really well, and I know some people are not going to be as well versed in that topic, I might mess with them just to almost to test their competence level before I can see how much I can engage with them in more of a playful way. Like, because again, like I'm not just going to engage with anyone in some any sort of play. It's got to be play in sort of like the arena that I'm comfortable in. And I've expanded that obviously as I get a little bit older and I learn more topics and experience more things. But definitely when I was a kid, I would try to be in control of the arena, as much as I can. Meaning, like, many INTPs. And stop me if I ramble too much, by the way. Many INTPs, many INTPs, we have this there's a little bit of a sense of superiority complex because of our introverted thinking and because of our ability to know our realm so well. But once we traverse outside of those realms, we get a little bit, incompetent. And I don't mean to talk crap about INTPs, but what I mean is that the importance of expanding our terrain is being able to do more things in more places, where I think ENTPs are a little bit more naturally effective in covering more terrain in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the NE breadth versus like the TI depth, right? So since I start off with breadth, I'd rather I think it's like I'm not as selective about what I use my TI for, because like I think INTPs, like they first think of something with their TI and then they explore all the possibilities of that one thing with their NE. Compared to NE, like first, like for me, I like kind of look over at like the big expanse and then I try to TI into all of them, which doesn't work. So then it just kind of ends up like I know a lot of things about like a lot of things, but I don't know a lot about one thing really. Like the typical like ENTPs, the jack of all trades thing, like master of none,
reading one chapter of like a whole bunch of books or something.
I always do that.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes like ENTPs like to bring people along with their shenanigans. Like you have a coffee chat every morning, and you made us watch a video about sea cucumbers, and I was like, "What?"
Oh my goodness. Okay, the sea cucumber breathes out of its like butt. So I was like, "Do you guys want to see it?" And then like half of them were like, "I will leave the chat," and I'm like, "Okay." And then I showed the video. Like,
right.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I want to share the joy, and also I wanted to get the reactions, and also like especially because you were there and you're a little more quiet in that chat, so I wanted to see if you would be like uncomfortable by that. So I kind of was trying to push the boundary there, but like you were cracking up, so I was like, okay.
It's true. Like EPs are boundary pushers.
Yeah.
So that's
Though I
really
don't think
perfectly
it's
example.
like in like the TE sense. I think TE does it very differently from like NEFE pushing,
Yeah.
because like not necessarily in a bad way, but SE and TE I think are a lot more like forceful in like their boundary pushing. They're kind of like boundary, like I don't care. While like FE and NE is like, ooh, there's a boundary. Let's see what we could do with it. It's like I don't just want to break it. I kind of want to have fun with it. Like,
right. Because like the ultimate goal is still kind of an FE thing. It's not about it's not like breaking a personal boundary or trying to construct something together. It's about sort of cultivating a new sense of harmony in a sense. It's like this new thing we can play with. We don't have to stay in this old boring way of being, niceties and being polite. We can still be fun and kind of push boundaries and do something different while being, harmonious. That's, even though it seems like a lot of ETPs are like poking at people to be jerks, it's like the ultimate goal is just to have fun and for the right people to connect together still.
Right.
I would imagine.
Right.
So no, never mind. I had a thought and I lost it.
Yeah, no,
That happens all the time.
I feel that.
Actually, no. So you were kind of talking about SETE versus like NEFE, and I think, for me, my NE is like functions don't really operate in a silo. And I think that's super important for people to know, especially if someone's like starting with type. So it's like literally thinking about the distance between NE and SI and like the tether to something grounded or something familiar. So for me as an INTP, that tether is closer together with my NE and SI. Not only that, but it's like more conscious, and I'm able to see more often, like it's the difference between booking a random ticket to some place around the world versus like going to somewhere I've been and then traveling like an hour or two outside of that place. It's being able to try new things, but somewhat tethered to something familiar. I think EPs sort of eventually develop, an ability to do that, even though their sphere is still quite the ability to reach far is still there. I think it's sort of the opposite growth path in a way, whereas EPs are trying to learn how to tether a little bit more, where INTPs are trying to learn to untether more. We're so used to our comfort, the cliche about video games and Cheetos and staying at home in your mom's basement and not leaving
Sorry,
until
my
you're 30.
INTP friend is like literally doing that like right now.
I know, and it's a thing. It's funny. That's what I talk about on my YouTube channel, is because I dedicate my YouTube channel more so to INTPs, because there's so much. There's a culture within INTPs who are naturally pushing against culture by being being this Cheeto eating, lazy, nihilistic, defeatist, like ignoring the world kind of thing.
Right.
That's a culture of dramatic INTPs. Dramatic is the word I use for unhealthy.
Yeah.
So, and I talk about, empowerment. So when I talk about mental health empowerment on my show and my YouTube channel, etc., like that's what I'm talking about, is for at least INTPs realizing that we are kind of creating an unconscious culture around being a lazy defeatist jerk. and that is not the destiny of an INTP. And part of that is using ENTPs sometimes as a muse. Like for people to say that I come off as an ENTP is a compliment. That means I'm doing the work to expand my territory, to be more fun, to be more playful, to not just be a boring explainer, but there's emotion in there, there's fun in there. Like I can be random, quote unquote, right? And for ENTPs, it's kind of the opposite direction, right? ENTPs, as far as I've seen, are going in this place where they need to tether a little bit more and, like you said, go deep as opposed to just like, breadth.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I don't want to hog all this. I'm so used to doing solo podcasts that I just talk all the time. So stop me.
You're fine.
Oh no, that was great. So you brought up a really good point about how all functions interact with each other. So no function operates in a silo. Like they all are connected in some way and they all work together. And it's easy, like it's more accurate just to describe type as a combination of functions working together rather than them just by themselves. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, brains are complex, right? Like it's not like literally the brain is split into 4 pieces or 8 pieces, however you want to look at it, right? Like it's not that simple. Like it's more of I would think of it more of like a heat map. There are multiple areas that light up that equal what we define as a function. Like these functions are language. This is tools. These are things that we use to understand ourselves. So to think that, and this is more of a public service announcement, I guess, but to think that, the functions operate by themselves, like that, I think that's usually a measure of a type, whether that's ENTPs or INTPs, being too much in that dramatic space where you're leaning too much on one function, whether that's NE being all over the place and just like, I can't make choices, or or introverted thinking, being like, I have everything in the world figured out. I know how life works and I don't need to leave my basement to prove anything. Right. That's basically, what I'm talking about when it comes to that sort of thing. So it's important to highlight that for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. So Jaycee, what are some differences you see between you and INTPs?
I mean, kind of like what you're saying too, just like the aspect of, I want to say like follow through, but also like since I am a 3, I know that like paints a lot of my personality for sure, and like makes me not as typical of a perceiver, like if there is like a typical one. But like, I mean, essentially it's like more of like I love to look to the future and I like to actually like do it, like I know like a typical ENTP thing is like they have a whole bunch of ideas and they don't follow through. I like to try and follow through with my ideas. Like I have like a great ENTJ mentor, and like his TE really like pushes me to actually like do stuff, right? And like I think that my friend, like from my friends who are INTPs or just interacting with INTPs, like they lack like, I want to say like they lack the drive. Like they don't, like they're incredibly intelligent, like initially, and like they know a lot, but then they lack like the grit most of the time, or like the drive to actually get things done, which is like, for me, I find it frustrating because I'm like, look at you. If you like, and of course I'm totally projecting, but I'm like, if you like put in like even half as much effort as I did, you'd get so much more done. And like it bothers me that like some of them don't, and the ones who like do become highly successful, like the ones that you hear about, whatever, like they get a lot done, and like that for me, like, I think wasted potential, sorry, I'm like not answering your question, but like for me, like wasted potential is like really frustrating. So then I think one thing that I see as a big difference between ENTPs and INTPs is like if they see the potential, that's enough for them. And like for ENTPs, if we see it, we want to at least dabble in it a little. They don't even like, they don't bother. They're like, I see the potential, so like that's good enough for me. You know, like you were saying, like they don't have to prove anything. I'm like, well,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of like what we talked about when it came to like the separation of functions. Like for you, it's like NE and SI are separate, but TI and FE are closer together. So your FE, which is like your version of the extroverted productivity function, essentially, is going to be higher up in the stack, a little bit higher, but it's higher enough to be something that, especially paired with your Enneagram 3-ness, is able to, all of that combined gives you that extra kind of FE push to put the work out and, put stuff out into the world. So, I mean, that speaks to you individually as an ENTP, but then there's also other ENTPs who are, they're struggling with that in various ways, depending on other aspects of their life. INTPs, like, yeah, definitely that's true. Where a lot of INTPs, when I talked about sort of feeling this sense of being defeatist or incapable, most of the INTPs that I've been working with, I've done polls with them to try to figure out like what some of their biggest challenges are. And productivity is one of the biggest insecurities that INTPs have.
Yeah.
Being able to produce. And one of the things that I try to give advice around is that, first of all, understanding that your thinking is part of the productivity, but it's not the only part of it. You do have to output, you do have to produce, get things done. So like you said, like having a mentor, I think is valuable for an INTP, but in a more natural sense, yeah, INTPs, we can have an easier way of an easier time of satisfying something in our mind as opposed to getting it out there in the world. And like we said sort of at the earlier part of the show, is that it's like no function lives in isolation. So if you're only thinking about a concept and you fully fleshed it out in your head and it's rad and it's awesome, it doesn't go, it's just in your head. It's like it's mental self-pleasure.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not something that is like,
it's not helpful or impactful like
right,
for
it's not,
anyone else, right?
right, it's not useful. So I think ENTPs will probably have an easier time of that than INTPs, for sure. And it'll be a different experience, I think, towards productivity. Like you said, like you're an Enneagram three. So that's
Three.
going to, and
Yes.
you're an Enneagram 3.
I don't have one. It's just I escaped.
so you're going to have that natural, like that side of you pushed you to find a mentor and to help you do all that stuff. I think any ENTP would find value in that. And the same thing for INTPs. I think we need extroverted judging mentors in our lives to help us, or at least an INTP who maybe's figured it out, not pointing any fingers, and to try to help them along to be able to do more things. So I think that's an excellent thing to call out, is the difference in compulsion for productivity. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, though I do see that there's like, I mean, obviously ENTPs, like our second function is introverted thinking, and like, yeah, like, but that's like the first function of like INTPs. And I think that there's like this big aspect of like ENTPs, like, yes, we like to be precise and accurate due to our TI, but since it comes second, we can actually like, we just want to get things done quickly, not necessarily like efficiently like a TE user, but like quickly because we want to move on to the next thing because we're curious.
Mhm.
And like
Right.
we can really lose like facts in there, like we lose like the TI precision. And I think that that's like really important for when like, especially my INTP friends, when they come in, they're like, hey, by the way, like this one statistic that like you probably made up is like not real. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, what? And then like, like they really like fact check me because they just have such a like depth of knowledge, and like they actually are trying to seek like the truth. And I really like that aspect. And I wish that like ENTPs, including me, like took that more seriously. Like we even have it there, like it's such a high position in our stack, and like even then, like we're nowhere near like the depth that a TI dom goes into, like just like TIing, if that's an adjective. I mean a verb. Whoa, a verb. Yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is, right, like sort of thinking about the how the lower functions support the upper functions. The child
Yeah.
functions support the parent functions.
Mhm.
And your FE, if you're not doing that TI work, is going to more so support random exploration than it is
Right.
about particular exploration, right? And it's
Right.
the same thing for INTPs. Like, I use my SI in terms of templating and tethering myself and doing some of the hard work that needs to be done, like a lot of repetitive tasks that need to be done. But my NE supports that sometimes. So I've developed kind of a trick for one of my productivity tricks is if I'm absorbing information that I need to absorb, like something more textbooky, less interesting, I will actually read the book out of order or read the article out of order so that
Right,
my
same
pattern
thing.
recognition.
About that. Like,
Yeah,
is it like hard for you to like? I mean, like in school, if there's something that I don't like I could still very easily, I think, like do it. Is it like difficult for you in that aspect?
for me, it's I don't know. I can't really speak for all INTPs in this sense, but
Right.
for me personally, I've had a hard time just reading random information. Like, I'm not interested in just like reading. It's not about like reading a manual in the way that maybe like a TE person might in order to accomplish something, right? I'm trying to find interesting information based on things that I find fascinating or interesting.
Mhm.
So I need to, if I'm trying to build a business, for example, with dopamine, and I'm trying to like do these podcasts and stuff like that. First of all, the whole core of what I'm doing is stuff, all of it as a whole is what I'm interested in. But there are aspects of it that I'm not interested in. Like,
Right.
I don't like having to do the whole process of editing and uploading and writing the descriptions and
Right.
writing and doing the distribution and all of that stuff is just like, like
Yeah.
it's just a terrible thing to do. But if I can find ways to mix that up, sometimes you just have to go through, right? Sometimes the
Mhm.
only way out is through. And I think an INTP's relationship with just going through sometimes is valuable, because once we get into motion, sometimes we can see that there's a pattern in which we can end up changing it up, and we don't necessarily. So what I'm saying is that a lot of INTPs, we can stop ourselves from doing the hard work because we think it's going to be just the same repetitive task over and over again. But usually, as soon as we get into motion, at least for me, once I get into motion, then I start to see a pattern and how I can create some sort of pattern or shortcut or some way to do this in a
Mhm.
more interesting way, or to change it up in some sort of way. But that usually only happens when I get into motion. So
Right.
the motion is just, sometimes you have to be on a monorail for a little bit to see that there's something interesting out there, and then you get off the monorail and you go do the interesting thing, and then you come back to the monorail, right? So that's sort of the way that I think about my NESI. Like, SI supports that by creating sort of a template or a track or a monorail or something like that, and then I'm able to branch off from there, since I know that I'm going to be okay, that I have something I can go back to. Worst case, if I have to do it the hard way, I do it the hard way. But usually there will be something interesting along the way that will make it far more fascinating for me to complete this task going forward.
I love that. Like, I love how you call it monorail. That's really like gives you a really good visual. So I have a question for you guys. What
Yep.
do you consider your life quest?
Jaycee.
That sounds like such an NI question. I love it. Love NI. Okay, well, for me right now, I'm a biology major, and like I want to go on to like grad school and do like genomics and stuff. And I think it's like really fascinating. For me, it's not about like helping people, honestly. Like that's like the cliche answer of like any job, right? Like I used to be like pre-med and people be like, why do you want to be a doctor? And everyone's like, to help people. I'm like, oh, okay, like do something else. You can help people in many different ways. Like my reason back then when I wanted to be a doctor was like I kind of like playing God. Like how cool is it that you could cut someone open and like fix the problem that would kill them if you didn't do anything, right? I'm like, that's cool, right? So I was like, that's why I wanted to be a doctor. But anyway, now like that's not my career path. But like I love like science, and like I just think it's so cool because the thing about being an NTP is like you don't really want to be tied down to something. You don't want to be stuck with something. Like what if you don't like it? What if like you want to change your mind later? Like the thing that's beautiful about like the field that I want to go into is like I want to do genomics. So like I'm learning like computer coding and stuff for it. Like number one, let's say I get bored of like my specific topic I'm doing, then I could move on to another aspect of like genomics, because there's so much science out there, so much to learn. Like I could change my career path many times within like my broad category. And also, let's say I don't want to do science anymore, like I learned how to code, I could work in business, I could work for like anyone with coding in this age. I want to be able to get to a point where I can be like free. Like people want like freedom, right? Like especially NTPs, like we want like freedom with our time, freedom to explore. And I think that I can like mix that in with like a good amount of structure by like being a researcher, being a scientist, and with a backup option in the past. I mean, what in the past? Whoa, in the future? Whoa, where am I going? My SI was like, oh, I'm sorry, whoa. But yeah, like with like a backup plan, like in case I don't like it, which I probably will, but in case I want to change it up. So I think for me, like I set it up so that like I have the freedom to like still choose what I want to do, even like 10 years from now. Again, if I want to revisit the same question, instead of like people who tie themselves down to like the single point where like they're miserable, but they're a doctor and their daughters love their big house, you know, like what can you do, right? Like you can't just quit your job because you can't pay for your kids' college. I don't know. Like I don't want to be like tied down, you know? And like, yeah, that's a very NTP. I'm an Enneagram type free, you know, like I just want to be like let loose. Yeah, so yeah, I like walked circles around that question, but that's my answer.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So Christian, what's your experience with being tied down? Like what is your relationship with that?
So it's interesting because when doing like personality profiling, sort of one of the questions to help differentiate EPs versus IPs is freedom or rightness, asking that kind of question. But there's a sense of freedom that INTPs want as well. We want a freedom of autonomy. I want to be able to make, to be able to do what I personally want to do at pretty much any time that I want to do it. So the question was about tethering, you said, or something like that?
Yeah, what's your experience of like not wanting to be tied down too soon?
Not wanting to be tied down too soon. I feel like it depends on your definition of tied down, which is a very TI way for me to look at it.
You define it, and then
yeah, SI. SI is like I want a precise definition, and TI
I know,
is like
right? Yeah, so I think I think my relationship with even the term tied down has changed over time. I think when I was 19, I think of tied down as like I had an ISTJ girlfriend who had her life basically planned out. She was like
I
working,
laughed.
right?
Because I like the SI Dom like tied. Okay, sorry. Carry on.
Right. I mean, yes, SI Dom. Yes, all yes.
We'll revisit that.
Yes, we will. So with an ISTJ that I used to be with, when I was like 19, right? Like as a 19-year-old, no 19-year-old wants to be tied down regardless. But she basically had her life kind of planned out. She's like, by 24, I want to start having my first kid. I want to be married and all this stuff. And I'm like, no.
I don't even know all that. Like, just vibe.
Right. And it's funny because like long before I knew anything about type, I had this inclination that there are people who are like kind of on that monorail that really enjoy being on the monorail of life. Like they really enjoy this. It's not really tied down necessarily, but you're on the track for the most part. And they're following a path and they're like, I know where to go. I know what to do. I know what the future is going to look like. And that brings me a sense of joy. I never fully understood it, but it was something that, I think I understand it more so these days, the idea of being focused. And tied down for me feels more like focus than it feels like restriction. I think that's been more of a mindset shift over time. I've kind of went through my crazy NE phase in a sense. Now I use my NE in a more concentrated way. I've went through the whole improv thing and I've traveled across the country twice. I've been across the world. I've done a couple of different things. Right. And it's, having to go through that and satisfy that made me feel like I improved my relationship with the idea of being tied down. It's actually kind of weird. The past few years has been more of a tied down kind of feeling for me. Like I haven't gone and traveled as much. I've been trying to sort of lay a foundation. I've been trying to.
But you enjoy that at this point in your life, right? Like that's a question.
Yes and no. I
Uh-huh.
think I'm still reorganizing my relationship with it. So
Okay.
in a sense, I'm learning the value of it when it's valuable in terms of SI specifically. And a lot of people have to go through this sort of like parent-child relationship with their second and third function, where the second function is developing, and it's kind of like when you grow up and it's like a single parent and single child relationship between the dominant and the tertiary function. And then the second function comes in and it's like this new hot parent that comes in and like they get together
They're hot.
and then
Yeah.
suddenly like the tertiary function is like, well, who's this person? I was always in charge. I could always do
Yeah.
whatever I wanted to do.
Right.
And now this new function gets to do whatever they want to do. That's not right. Like, why can't I do the bird do? So,
That's
so
fair.
basically, what I'm trying to define through all that nonsense is that my tertiary SI I'm becoming more okay with certain elements of being grounded, but not wholesale. It's I don't allow myself to be tied to everything. And that's really the thing, is like, I think I feel more in charge of what I allow myself to be tied to. Whereas growing up, it feels more like this is your destiny. You're supposed to go on this track. You're supposed to do these things in this order, or you're supposed to get this kind of job or do this kind of specific thing. And I think the more I have developed my intuition, I increase my relationship with being tied down, because I choose what I get tied down to. I have an amazing partner, and I hope I'm tied down to her for the rest of my life. That would be incredible. I love this life, and I'm trying to build a life that there are little meaningful things that I enjoy as I go forward in this life. And I find myself uh, enjoying lame jokes more. Like, not just being any ridiculous, but like dad joke kind of things.
Oh
And I'm like,
no.
stupid puns. Yeah.
Oh no.
I know, and it's very upsetting for a lot of NTPs in general. But like, for me, it's like, I don't know. I just don't feel tied down to either a label of being an INTP, or the way I should behave, or what someone should expect of me, and where my life should go. I feel like I get to choose those things, and therefore I enjoy them more. If that all makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's such a beautiful like talk about how you experience being tied down. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Christian, you never answered the question. What is your life quest?
What is my life quest? I love the way that you put that. There's a book by AJ Drenth called the Intp Quest that I recommend every INTP read, by the way.
I've read that.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it's really good. And in a sense, that sort of maps to what my quest is. My quest is to enjoy the quest, which I'll get to an actual answer, because that's a little bit of a cop-out answer. But I want to enjoy the path to the thing that I'm trying to get to. And the thing that I'm trying to get to is, it's a vision. It's more conceptual. That's something that I'm trying to allow myself to do as well, which is part of the SI work, is like not tying myself to a specific goal, but trying to define a vision for my life and allowing the moment to redefine the vision a little bit. But the SI part still allows me to have, like, the vision still has to be kind of in this ballpark. So the vision, in a sense, is I want to be able to do more things like this. In a sense, I want to be able to be more of a mentor or a guide to people, like traditional guru. I want to be the guy with the long white beard. I want to be Ram Dass, but maybe not necessarily the way that he did it. I just want to be, I'm not talking spiritual guru or anything like that. I want to be able to continue to use my knowledge to support people, the way that I think about things, the way that and I feel like I'm already starting to manifest that a little bit. But to carry that into the future is eventually to hopefully make some semblance of big picture change, whether that's with my community of people that I end up connecting with. You can already see a theme that basically it's related to an FE ambition. This idea for people to see me for who I am, and that to be accepted as a part of society. I want INTPs to be able to, I want to nurture INTPs and be able to see that a lot of the dramatic aspects of themselves is like a self-perpetuated thing, that it's not a destiny, that INTPs, when they're able to be thoughtful and spend extra time sort of cultivating that TI-FE relationship, that they can be they can be this massive contributors to society in a positive way. You know, some of the most amazing INTPs in existence, as far as we've identified, have been able to change the scope of reality and our understanding of it. So in a sense, I want to do that for the mental health field in a lot of ways, not necessarily literally the field, but a lot of people individually, and take this sense of mental health empowerment into the future. This feels like my big picture work, is being able to show people that that mental health and what we talk about is not just about mental illness, first of all. And second of all, it's not just about diagnoses and just knowing who you are, but then being able to take action based on who you are, taking personal responsibility. Even though there are things outside of our control, there are plenty of things like our brain chemistry we can't always change. We can't affect those things. But there are aspects that if you define where you're at, you can know where to go. And the knowing where to go is where I think a lot of the mental health field is missing. So that's why I specifically refer to my show as a show about mental health empowerment, because it's about power from the self, being able to take personal responsibility, to go forward, to do the things that matter, are important, that are thoughtful, that are helpful, that are not just fighting each other on the internet left and right, that we can actually use thoughtful words to understand each other and have cognitive empathy, not just emotional empathy, but be able to understand why someone thought something that they thought and allow more space for that thought and what they're doing. So, I mean, that's a lot of things. It's sort of like a big sort of vague vision, but I'm allowing myself to think that way a little bit more because the more specific I get, the more messy it gets. So I've learned that about myself. The more I try to do an NI type of thing, the more frustrated I get. It doesn't allow me to be in the moment. So, 6 function critical parent stuff, not going to get into all that. But, but essentially I'm trying to let the vision sort of take me there, but the vision supports it's all about, FE big picture stuff and being able to continue to rest into who I am and that being myself naturally supports people, if that makes sense. Did that satisfy the question about my quest? I mean, it's a little vague, but it's a thing.
Yeah, that did. Tim, my INTP friend, he talked about something similar to what you talked about how like INTPs, when they're able to harness their TI, they're able to update the intellectual fabric of society and to upgrade the thought categories that we inhabit. So you guys are lovely.
Thank you. Do my best.
So Jace, Jaycee, in what ways are you? So what are your thoughts on chaos? Do you like it? Do you hate it?
Chaos.
That's a really good question.
I was in like a Zoom video call on Sunday, and like one of the girls there was ranking everyone's like funkiness levels, and like I got the highest ranking, and I was like, okay, what do you mean by funky? And they're like, you're so chaotic. I was like, oh, that's true, right? So okay, so I live for chaos, but I live for organized chaos. Like I am really, really organized. Like my room sometimes becomes an absolute mess. But like for example, like I am like my life is just chaotic because I like do a lot of school and I do a lot of work and I just like I have a lot of hobbies and I actually think I managed to do most of them. I sacrifice sleep, but the rest I kind of have, right? So, but I think like I have like this organized chaos. Like I can't just let myself be chaotic because then I'll be like the typical stereotypic ENTP where they have all these interests and like they pick up on things, they never finish them, no follow through, no one can depend on them. Like I don't want to be that person, right? And like again, I'm projecting whatever, but like I live for like having a lot of stuff, but I like love to package it and organize it. Like for example, like Joyce, when you asked me to film this with you like a week ago or something, like it went immediately into my calendar, right? And I'm sure like you sent me a message yesterday to remind me or whenever you sent that one, and I'm like, yeah, I like double checked my calendar. I'm like, yeah, it's still in there, like I do have this aspect of like reining in the chaos, yet like I allow myself to have spaces to be chaotic because I think that like I need it a little bit. Like I set up like that coffee time chat, which I forgot to plug at the beginning, actually at the beginning of this, but like, yeah, I do like a coffee time chat, just moved over to Discord, just especially through this quarantine because people are like, some people are like sad and lonely and just added community or whatever, but like they're like, it's been really nice. Like, you know, you could just go in and then like it's like chaos. Like, and it's just like it's organized chaos for me because it's like I have 2 hours set in the day where we have our like quote unquote coffee time, even though you can hang outside of that, right? But like within there, it's like chaos. So my long answer to your question was basically just like, yes, I love chaos, but I believe that it needs to be like put like there's a time for it, as well as like kind of like what you're saying too, like you have to like tether it, right? Like to use it for like good stuff. Like yesterday, Nate and I were talking for a while and like it was completely chaotic, but now we have like a new video series idea. So, and it was insane, but like, you know, like stuff like that. So I think like chaos, like for me, breeds a lot of creativity and everything. But also like I can't just allow myself to only be like chaotic because I'll get nothing done, and that kind of sucks.
Right.
So yes.
That's true. When you're a perceiver, you're not condemned to not completing anything. Like you can like really truck through and you can really get stuff done if you put your mind to it.
Really well. That was all really well said. And I guess if you want me to answer the same question, I assume.
Yeah.
So I it's very similar. I feel like I thrive in chaos because I thrive in chaos because I'm usually so focused on controlling myself, and I can control myself more than anything else. Once I get a little bit comfortable in the extroverted chaos, like if I'm in a space where there's literally a lot of people doing a lot of things, it really becomes context dependent. But chaos, I don't know, it really depends on the kind of chaos. Sometimes emotional chaos, like what's happening in the world right now, is really hard to manage. I just went to the grocery store yesterday, and like I would characterize that as a chaos that I do not appreciate. But I do the best that I can in those moments to navigate through it because I control myself. Like if I went with Molly to the grocery store, she becomes a variable that like she can control herself. She's a grown woman, she whatever. But like there's aspects that we have to consider in terms of like managing our time, managing where we are. Now we both could possibly get affected by what's happening in the world. Like, you know, I sort of throw myself in the fire of chaos more often than I would allow other people in my life to, because I just have kind of more control over myself as an individual.
Do you find that makes it harder for you to like delegate in general?
Yeah, I do have a really, really hard time delegating. And I've had hard times thriving in like agency situations. I've worked for agencies in the past where I've been a designer, and I've worked remotely, and working remotely is all about communication, especially I think in retrospect, it was probably an FJ kind of culture. So the kind of communication was something that was like way off of my radar at the time, and especially. So I would often find myself getting in trouble for things where I'm like, I thought I was okay. So I'm kind of missing my point, but basically the idea is that if it's a chaotic situation where it's a little bit more emotional, it can get really hard to handle. But if it's myself, you know, I will do the best that I can to handle everything myself as much as I can. But with what I'm doing with dopamine, it's going to get to a point where part of the FE ambition that I kind of talked about, my quest, is being able to eventually expand to this idea of like trusting people and working with people and trusting other people's competence. You know, that's that's really hard. That's hard for any NTP to do. But I've been working with some great people. I actually just started a sort of a apprenticeship for type, in a sense, as my way of trying to navigate someone through my knowledge. And then at the end of that, if they want to continue to work with me, like we can find a way to work together. Hopefully I can eventually like hire people that way. And you know, it's hard for me to just trust quote unquote anyone, because it's hard for me to measure any random person's competencies and knowing what they can handle. Otherwise I would just rather do it myself.
Well, I really like that aspect of just like, you know, like you were saying, like having a mentor is always so helpful. And like the reason why, like, I think if anything, like, oh, I could actually survive in like schooling for a lot longer, because a lot of people say, you know, NTPs like don't do well in like school settings, which I could agree on some hands, right? On some hands, on some aspects. But like,
I struggled.
Yeah, like with all three of my hands. No, but like I have like this one like mentor, ENTP. He's like a doctor, like, you know, and like just like seeing that like I saw that. Seeing like what he has accomplished is so inspiring for me as an ENTP. I'm like, wow, like you are like the ideal, you made it, like you're doing what you love. And like that's that's why I love like your idea of like just mentorship and like getting mentorship from someone who is like similar to you, has same struggles as you, same like thought processes, is like incredibly like amazing. Like of course any mentor is great, but one that actually like deeply relates, like that is always really inspiring. So I really like what you're doing, like with the like, you know, trying to push other INTPs. I think that's really like inspiring and it's really cool.
I appreciate that. And, you know, I've been able to start doing that because I've had my mentors. You know, like I said, AJ Drenth, his books are amazing. You know, like our friend Susan Storm is wonderful with all the things that she's talked and shared. I'm sure a lot of us are doing this because she's been doing what she's doing. Personality Hacker.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's where I met Joyce in person, was at one of the Profiler training events. Joel and Antonia have been personal mentors to me, friends, and being able to support me. So I'm taking a lot of their teachings and then passing it on. And so now doing this apprenticeship stuff that I'm doing with someone that I've been working with on Twitter,
forward, right?
Right. Trying to pay it forward, and then eventually trying to build this sort of coaching, counseling, support network through dopamine is part of the vision that I didn't really share. But part of the vision, the quest in a sense, is being able to have placements for people should they need like therapy, or, you know, people go through like taking a test online, like through like my chatbot that I'm working on or something, and then being able to go and take, you know, the steps that they need to get the support they need. Sometimes you can identify someone as like, yeah, you're empowered, you're on the right track, you're good, you don't need any help. But plenty of people do need help and support in different ways. So being able to provide a myriad of different support structures and systems is really what I'm trying to do.
I think like that also like kind of just parallels a little bit with like, yeah, like I've been saying, like my thing, like how I have a series on productivity, like just like because I know so many NTPs or like, yeah, Ps in general, they just really struggle with like sitting down and doing their work. And I'm like, well, here's some tips that like things I struggled through because I relate to you in this way. Because I know when I looked up a lot of those videos of how to like study for long periods of time, it's usually like an SJ, and I can't like listen to their tips because it doesn't apply to me, right? Like not like I'm better, but like I'm worse. like you know, I need like something else, like I need like a reframe, if anything, like a different mindset. So like I totally feel that, like just like that aspect of like, I think it's like the FE coming out also, like, you know, you want to like help and give back, and also like, of course, as a 3, there's an aspect of me who's like, look up to me, you know, of course, there's that aspect. Like there's always, I mean, for me, there's usually a selfish aspect in there too, but I like to use my selfish,
there is.
Yes, yeah. I like to use my selfish desires to also help people. Like, you know, if I'm interested in it anyway, like I might as well like help other people. And I don't know. I think it's really cool. That's my way again of saying like your stuff is really cool. And I think that we have like a similar sort of mindset in that, like, you know, we're trying to like give back and like pay it forward, or like actually help out, like help people out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And use our natural strengths to do that. Like you said, we're not trying to be an SJ or an FJ.
Right.
You know, we're trying to just do things the way that we were given or was implanted in us, or however you want to look at it.
We package it differently. Yeah. And like sometimes people just need like if I'm like right now I've been making like type videos, you know, and like there are a lot of type videos out there, but I'm like, what if someone needs to hear it in the exact way that like I would say it, right? And like for it to actually click for them, they don't have to be an NTP, but maybe like there's a specific person who needs to hear it from like a weird rambly person who like, you know, like word vomits random stuff. Like maybe they need to hear it that way. Like, so I just like, even if it's like nothing new, like there's still like a different context to it. So I think like it's just valuable to share, like even if like, I don't know, like anyone else, like, you know, who's like, oh, I want to like start making videos, but like I'm like, you know, like no one needs it. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people probably don't need it, but some people will. Like, you know, some people will find.
And it's not about everyone. It's about those people. It's the one
like your audience. That matter. Exactly.
Right. So I think that's a good expression of your TI, essentially, like your ability, like, because TI is not just about data and information. It's integrity. It's information. It's like, it's who you are as a person. It's identity. Like I see people struggle with their identity all the time. And I'm like, I've always known who I am. I'm always changing and I'm dynamic, but I have like an inbuilt relationship with that. But I know EPs can struggle with that because of whether it's FE or TE, having that extroverted judging, you know, kind of looking for external validation, having that internal validation of saying like, what I have to say is valuable and going forward with that
Right.
knowledge, like that is a good expression of your TI being empowered, and I love seeing
Yeah.
that.
I mean, yeah, again, I think it's just like it comes down to like regardless, even if you seek external validation, you need to first have the internal, like I don't believe in the you have to love yourself to love other people like thing, but like it's kind of similar, like the concept, right? Like
Mhm.
you like for you to actually be able to really accept people's external validation, you also need to be able to like validate yourself like internally. And like I think it also comes across as like when people get compliments, like people who like don't know how to take a compliment because like they don't believe you, or like because like for me, if
Yeah.
there's something I'm good at, I'm very comfortable saying I'm good at it. And I think it's like a difference between confidence and arrogance, right? I'm not
Right.
saying I'm good at it and that's why you're like trash. Like I don't
Right.
like, it's not that. It's like I'm good at it because I'm good at it, like period. You
Yeah.
know, like it doesn't
Right.
like, so like the externals, like you're saying, like yeah, like they're there, but like I think for me, like a big part of my growth journey has been like realizing that like I am like pretty great regardless of like other people. Like it doesn't have to be like a comparison thing, and like I
Right.
don't know, I just think it's like cool like that.
And I think a lot of INTPs struggle with that because,
Right.
you know, like I said, like I'm confident in who I am. Like not confident in the traditional sense, or like I've always never, or I should say I've never always been that way.
Mhm.
Never, whatever.
Yeah.
I haven't always been that way. You know, and then INTPs tend to struggle with this idea of like, I'm right. I know who I am. I'm awesome. I love myself, blah, 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 blah. There's this degree of self-love that is inherent to TI that the second that we start to incorporate FE, for us, it's our inferior FE, and we start to get feedback from the outside world, suddenly we get the feedback that we're not as awesome as we thought we were. And now we have to kind of calibrate to that, and kind of rediscover what about us is awesome and which things don't necessarily jive with culture or jive with productivity or jive with being a productive member of society.
Right.
Though that's the push and pull that TIFE in general has to kind of deal with. But it's with INTPs, again, based on like literally the locations of the functions, it's going to be a little bit of a wider chasm.
That happened.
Sometimes you start saying a word and you're like, I don't know that I've ever said that word out loud. I think I've only
Yeah.
ever read that word. So anyway, yes, I was done my rambling, and we kind of ran away with the ball, but I
Yeah.
hope, you know, we're good. Carry on.
Yes.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, the TI is like the self, and the FE is like the feedback. So, like, what the self thinks is not always what the feedback gives you back. So, you have to reconcile the differences. And for the INTP, it might be like the functions are farther, like the TI and the FE are farther apart, so they feel it even more. Maybe the discrepancy.
Right.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I
So
think like what you were saying, Jaycee, like you basically you need both validations in a sense. I think depending on where you are on your stack and how that balance is, you know, you might need more personal validation versus external validation, but the external validation is still important to get things right. And to be able to find the right path forward and to do what's important and to do what's actually meaningful and not just, you know, be, you know, self-effacing in your head all the time. To be a human being means to take that risk and be brave. And that's part of what I talk about with INTPs too. Like putting your thoughts out there is an act of bravery, because when we get that feedback, it hurts, it's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's going to affect our sense of self-worth. A lot of INTPs struggle with self-worth because culture at large doesn't know how to help INTPs calibrate, because we often have to do it ourselves. That's why I'm trying to be the mentor to them, to give them the thoughts to work with, because I don't think there are many out there that are doing this kind of thing. And I think it's the same thing applied to a lot of ENTPs with that TIFE polarity. It's such a weird struggle, but it's so important to allow for better balance in reality.
Yeah, that's so true. And you guys talked about how when you create material, like it's not meant to help everybody, but it might help someone who really needs it at that moment. Or
Yeah.
from when it's said by you, it gives a certain perspective that makes the like really impacts someone. It's kind of like this story about like the starfish and the little boy. And so the little boy sees starfish on a beach and he's throwing the starfish back into the water. And like there's someone who comes up to him and asks, like, why are you throwing the starfish back into the water? They're just going to die. You can't save all of them. But but the boy was like, it makes a difference in this starfish's life, and then he throws a starfish, and in this one's life, and this one's life, and it's like our impact on things. Just because we can't help change the problem completely, our impact is like wide for some people. It changes their world. For the starfish that he saved, like they're going to live, and like that's no small thing. It's changing the starfish's life, and you can do that for people. Like if the person is a starfish and you just impact them once, you could really change their life for the better.
I think there's like this whole generational cultural shift as well, like from like, so we've been in like the postmodernistic era for a while, right? And like postmodernism is a lot of like, wow, everything kind of sucks and there's nothing we could do about it. That sucks. Like that's kind of it. Like of course that was like the 3-sentence version, but like metamodernism is like the new generation that's like coming up, and like that is like, you know, everything sucks and there's nothing we could do about it, but like we're still gonna try. And I think that that is like coming across, especially like in like our conversation here. Like, you know, we know that like, yeah, like we're not going to reach everyone, but like, you know, if it's even just one person to like, I think it's worth it, right? Like, I think finding like that joy in just even helping one single person is like enough for it to work, you know? Like for me, like it was never about like, oh, I want to impact so many people. I'm like, if literally one person's life has changed for the better because of me, that's great. And like I'm not going to stop there and be like, oh, I changed one person's, I'm done. But like, you know, like just that aspect of like even impacting a single one, and like you're saying, Joyce, like that's like exactly it. And like I think that that's cool that we are shifting towards there culturally as well.
That brings us back to like finding motivation to complete things. And I think that people feel defeated easily when they think that their impact doesn't mean anything. It's like, oh, you know, I can't really make a big, huge difference, so I might as well not do anything at all. And I think that's what causes a large majority of people's unproductive behaviors. It's that like they could fix it if they were to see themselves as making a bigger contribution than they initially think that they would. So it's all like a self-perception type of thing too. And it's like, if you fix that, then maybe you'll be able to finish things, because now you'll believe that what you finish has value.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite literally a quality versus quantity kind of thing. You sort of think about the density of the impact that you have on a single person. Even just doing profiling sessions, when at the end somebody expresses a feeling of relief. I actually just started posting testimonials on my podcast about that. And just to hear literally the person who's a friend of mine say something to the effect of like, it just feels this great, there's this great sense of relief. Like I'm able to rest into myself and move forward. Like having that as just like a single measure of something that you're doing, even if you're impacting in that moment, even if they eventually relapse, that's on them. It's unfortunate, but sometimes that happens.
Right, of course.
You know, you did the best that you could in that moment. And I think as individuals, as mentors, as teachers, as coaches, as counselors, as guidance people, YouTubers, creators, I want people to feel like you're having an impact just by affecting one person, because the density, the weight of that impact is immense, and that's incredibly valuable. And again, like you said, like the world is so big. We think about the big picture change. We think about global warming, et cetera, and it's like like that is too big of a scale that we're not kind of meant to really think about. We're still creatures. We're still animals. We're still influenced by immediate communities and connections. So to kind of bring things down into a more focused space where you can invite people into your communities, your YouTube channel, your Patreon, your, you know, away from the open ocean of the internet. I just did a podcast episode about this idea, but the internet is like this open, lawless ocean that people are like pirating from each other and yelling at each other and shooting cannons at each other. And our goal as creators, as people who have been through the battles, who have been through our own growth path and challenges, is to not necessarily, you know, remove conflict from people's lives or to make it so it's quote unquote easier for them, but to give them the tools. It's not about shelter. It's not about protecting them. It's about giving them the thoughts, giving them the ideas, giving them the ways in which in which they can take their own personal strength and go forward into the ocean when they need to get what they need, and then have a safe place to grow and to incubate, essentially. You know, that's why the idea of quote unquote safe spaces is an important concept to continue to cultivate. Like you're doing that, Jaycee, with your YouTube channel and your coffee talks. Like that's creating not a traditional mental health safe space, but it's creating a space away from the chaos, the open sea of the internet, where people can cultivate, grow, learn, and be able to have their moment of throwing the starfish back into the water, because that's just what we're all trying to do, and hopefully that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
think like the big flaw is just like people assume like if they don't see the impact that they have on other people, they don't have any. And I'm like, like I don't know, like you just have to step away from all that. Like some some videos you post maybe won't get a lot of views, like whatever. Like you maybe the 2 views that were there, maybe one of those like it deeply impacted them. Like you don't know that. So it's like being able to just trust that like it is helping someone. Like you just kind of have to like trust that, like, and like lean into it. So yeah, I agree with what you've been saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think like the concept is like Christian, you talked about incubating and how like you can like kind of cultivate a safe space for people. And it's so beautiful when we're able to do that and make people feel at home, like with themselves, or give them permission to put themselves first and to put their dreams first, or to put whatever was important to them first. And like a small shift in a mindset, like if you can provide an inkling of inspiration to someone when they need it, and it can completely unravel all of these like ripples in their life that are for the better. And it's like when we trust in our ability to send positive ripples in another person's life, that's when we're able to help them to a maximal I don't know, a maximal like amount that we want, or I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess it's time to wrap it up. We got a little bit sidetracked, but extroverted intuition. I feel like this is a really fruitful talk about, meaning and, believing in yourself and what you produce and its effects on people.
Yeah.
And so I love talking to you both. Also, check out their material. These 2 people are very wonderful. Christian has an amazing podcast called Dopamine, and I'll link that below. And Jaycee has a YouTube channel. She's really funny. She'll teach you how to dab and all that fun stuff.
Don't tell them that.
Oh, he's doing it.
Yeah, you need to see the video. I like break it down very TI. Like it's called my low SE dance class. Like,
oh, that's funny.
But whatever. That was just a one-time thing, I think.
That's right.
But yeah, like Jaycee is really funny, and Christian provides a lot of thought-provoking material for people to think about. So check those 2 out. And if you like this video, like and subscribe. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Like, you are a trooper, and you are incredible for making it through this long. And have a great day, y'all. Bye.
Much love. Where's the camera? There's the camera. I'm gonna go play Animal Crossing. Bye.
Yeah, Animal Crossing. Bye.